left because it's not true. This is one of the most common answers that I've gotten. I made a video asking ex-Mormons to share why they left the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I got hundreds and hundreds of responses. And this was one of the top ones. So this is something that you have to unpack, because what do they mean by this? What do you mean, not true? This is usually what people mean by this. When they're looking at this big sphere of what doesn't align with science, their own personal revelation, the scriptures, other religions, spiritual leaders, what makes sense to them, near-death experiences, what the church leaders teach, they're finding that things don't overlap perfectly. And what should happen is personal revelation should perfectly overlap with what makes sense, and it should perfectly overlap with science, and it should perfectly overlap with the scriptures. But they don't. And the failure of things to overlap causes a lot of cognitive dissonance, discomfort. The church is either true or it's not true. And they find that certain things in there can't be true, or were later found to be false. The perfect image that they had in their minds of the way that the church is, and the way that the church ended up being as they did more research and became an adult, don't line up. Suddenly this introduces a large component of uncertainty in their lives. They try to sort through this mess and try to figure out what's right and what's not right. It's such a messy, disgusting pile of garbage. They just throw the whole thing in the trash. Untangle this massive knotted ball of yarn that's turned into a bunch of dreadlocks. It could take me years to sort this all, or just throw in the garbage. Sometimes I think that people have so many messed up beliefs that throwing the trash is probably a better idea for a lot of people. At least clip off a large section. And for some people, the section that they clip off ends up being the church, especially with blacks in the priesthood and polygamy and all these other really uncomfortable subjects. In light of things like the Book of Abraham, the translation not lining up with what the text says. And there's just endless things, especially if you get on social media like I did, or started reading books or looking at websites. John Dehlin, the CES letter, Mormon Think website, just an endless amount of holes poked in the boat. And essentially, there's no way that it can be true. And this is where, as an active member and believing member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I would agree with you. What you believed as a member was probably not true. The parts that seemed and felt wrong were probably wrong. And what you thought the church was is probably not accurate. You see, we have something growing up, this black or white thinking, this all or nothing way of approaching things. The good guys and the bad guys. The church is this source of certainty for lots of people. Once the prophet speaks, we know that it's absolutely infallible. No more praying necessary. No more thinking necessary. The prophet is the infallible mouthpiece of God. So are the scriptures. So is my bishop. So are my parents. So are my Sunday school teachers. As we get older, we see the fallibility. We see the imperfection. And we either have to get rid of our black and white thinking, our all or nothing thinking, or we have to get rid of the church. Or you can bury your head in the sand and just, stick your fingers in your ears and say la la la. It works for some people. You start talking about things and they shut down and they don't listen. But I would offer that maybe that's not a good approach either. The challenge here is that this is going to introduce uncertainty for a lot of people. Now, some people, they go from certainty to certainty. They go from being a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, when all the certainty that it offered them, and when they don't get certainty from that, they want certainty somewhere. So they search for certainty in atheism, still holding to that all or nothing thinking. They didn't let go of it. They still have it. They changed their approach. Now they're extremely skeptical. Instead of leaving the black and white paradigm, they just shifted from the white to the black. I present to you that all fields of science are messy. Very messy. And if you feel lots and lots of certainty about something, it's because you are suffering from the Dunning-Kruger effect. But that as you study into science, you'll discover that all of us are ignoramuses. We know a lot, but we recognize that there is so much more to be known. The Dunning-Kruger effect is what people feel when they know very little on a subject, but they feel very confident about what they know. And as they learn more, they actually become less confident about how much they know. At a certain point, they do start to regain some confidence, but it's never at the level that they had when they were the most ignorant. And if you're a member of the church and you think that everybody's a complete idiot because they left, or they can't believe it, Or vice versa, you're probably to the far left of the Dunning-Kruger effect. You'd be a little bit more humble if you did more research. It can be reasonable to believe in God, and it can be reasonable to not believe in God. It can be reasonable to believe in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, certain claims in certain ways, and the opposite can also be. So first, let's approach the concept, the idea of revelation, and show how it can be a messy thing. Here's God. He knows everything. He gives us some answers, but the answers are not everything. They're just part of the information. Our spirit then receives these answers, and these answers are then relayed to our brain. There's some connection between our spirit and our brain. Our brain is imperfect and it's messy. It's going to try to take whatever spiritual message and turn it into something that we can understand with physical components, based on our experiences and senses and memories. This is what I would suspect is probably the most or the largest margin of error. It's like trying to paint a sunrise in textures or something. It doesn't compute fully here. But then we have the next step. This is where our brain is going to encode whatever it is that it received into something that we can perceive. This is usually vision or visual cortex, not through our retinas though. It's an emotion in our limbic system, or it's something based in words, using like Broca's area. Now, it's going to encode this imperfectly only with things that already exist in there. Existing visual ideas, existing emotions, existing language. And these things are all imperfect. It's like trying to sculpt the statue of David out of soda cans. It's not going to be perfect. And it's not supposed to be. This is not the point of our life here on this earth, to have everything be perfect. We're here to experience mortality, imperfection, problems, struggles. If we all knew that we were immortal, we would not be experiencing mortality. So after it's encoded these things into something that our brain can wrap its head around in some degree, it then goes to our memory. And this is where we introduce lots more problems, memory errors. Every time you recall something, your brain changes it. And then we try to communicate it to other people, which then encodes it into language again and introduces a whole new set of errors. And then we communicate this to somebody else, and the same thing happens with them, where they're retelling and their language errors. And this happens, how many times? And ultimately, at some point, we end up with what we believe. This whole process is subject to so much error. Some people say, well, just throw the whole thing away then. That's a ridiculous approach. You wouldn't do that with history. You wouldn't do that with psychology. You wouldn't do that with medical science. If we find that two historical records disagree with each other, we're not just going to throw away the entire field of history. If we find that some of our theories in psychology are not correct, we're not going to throw away the entire field of psychology. Nor would it make any sense to do the same thing with theology. Instead, what we do is the same thing we do with these other fields. We see where things overlap. In history, we might say, well, what in archaeology lines up with the written accounts, with what's consistent with the psychology of human behavior. And then where those three things overlap is what's most likely accurate from a historical point of view. With religion, we look at things like personal revelation, scriptures, other religious teachings, spiritual leaders, what makes sense to you, near-death experiences, and what doesn't disagree with science. And what's there in the middle is what's most likely accurate. Doesn't mean that we know that it's accurate. Welcome to the world. We do not have certainty here. This isn't mathematics. This is more like history or psychology. If the process of revelation was totally infallible, all of us would know 100% that we were not mortals. And if we know that we're not mortals, we wouldn't be experiencing mortality right now. And if we weren't experiencing mortality, then part of the point of this whole earth life experience would be ruined. So what isn't true? Probably lots of things. Probably lots and lots and lots of things. Probably the way that we conceive everything is not true. Probably all of it's inaccurate. And we just have little tiny glimpses of the way that things actually are. And if something doesn't make any sense, it's probably because we understand it incorrectly. So that we do the best that we can with the information that we have. We find places where the most circles overlap, and we move forward with our conscience in the light of Christ, making the best decisions that we can. Whatever reasons you had for saying it's not true are probably accurate. The way that you view those things is probably not true. And all of us are probably falling somewhere on that spectrum of whatever we believe in, having some degree of being accurate and some degree of being inaccurate, just based on this whole process. Religion is a vehicle. It's a platform that enables us to help one another, to learn more about God, to be better people, to be the hands and the mouth of Christ, to do what he would do and to say what he would say. And as much as we do that, then the church and religion fulfills its purpose.